Well, hi everybody. How are you today? This is Mark Chaffardini. Thank you so much for rejoining the podcast. I'd like to let's get a little lyrical here. Let's just say, hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Go See Talk Podcast Experience to bring back a composer of limitless potential. We've been separated from far too long, but he's a musician who's been living with leopards, a cyberpunk who is dreadfully skilled. He brings chaos to your ears, and you will love every note down to your last breath. Here he is, the dynasty of one, the incomparable Paul, Leonard Morgan. Welcome. Good to see you again, Paul. How are things in your world?
I couldn't write that if I tried. Did you get AI to do that, or did you do it
No,
yourself?
that was
That's
me.
amazing.
I got four sticky notes. I just
Ah!
penned this in 5 minutes. I was like, you know what? Paul needs like he's a composer and a person who fires on 1,000 cylinders. He needs to be amped up like a wrestler. So
Well, I thank you for that. I will put that on my toilet wall. It's brilliant. Good. I'm good. I'm just saying. I'm back from these two premieres, these two projects that I've been on. So my voice is a little bit at the moment. I was over in New York for 3 days for Last Breath premiere. Came back to the studio, do some writing. Went back to New York for the Chaos premiere, and also actually Tune Out the Noise, another Errol Morris film, and then came back. So my voice is a little destroyed at the moment. So if the dogs suddenly come in at the sound of it all, that's why it is.
it's so high. It's so high. Well, great to see you again. I would say that, I would imagine with you being like I said, a dynasty of one, you're incomparable, you're a self-contained machine. When someone picks up the phone and say, "We have a project for Air," do you just say yes because you know it's Errol Morris? It's like, well, don't matter if it's mating sea tortoises or, serial killers. I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Do you know, it's not. I mean, it's not like that. I was. I feel it sounds completely bollocks. I feel unbelievably privileged every time he calls. It's not a case of assuming that you're going to be working with him and Stephen. It really is a case of, look, it's wonderful that you think I can bring something to a project, and every single one of his projects are different. So, I'm sure he will go off and get other people at some stage. But it's been a wonderful process as far as kind of scoring with him. And I think what I love about it so much is it's such a small team. Stephen, the editor slash producer slash so much more. Molly, the researcher slash so much more. Jeremy that does the graphics, Lee that does the sound, and Igor that does the cinematography, and obviously then Errol himself and Robbie the producer. It's that small team which I just adore. It feels like a little family.
It's like a Swiss watch, They all fit in the same compartment and the tools come out when you need it the most. But I'm sure this is a dumb question to ask for a documentary because you always want to say you always want to stay away from the narrative, you can appreciate the quiet moments in a film, but with a documentary, what's your temperature for, hey, we don't want to overstep the dialogue, but we feel like this needs to be amped up. I mean, is the approach different from a video game and a movie?
With most filmmakers, you're giving lots of space for dialogue. You're being respectful is the wrong phrase, but you're giving space to it. Errol and Stephen, they really like music driving through it, which I think came about because of Philip Glass in the early days with him and the Thin Blue Line and stuff. They became synonymous, and Philip's the use of motion, it really drove the pace. And I remember when I was starting to work with Errol, I think it was on Dharma, American Dharma, and he was going, I want more. And I was like, but it's going to get in the way of Bannon's voice or whatever it was. And when you're writing documentaries, it's weird because the voice becomes the rhythm. It's different from film, and you hear it over and over again, and suddenly the voice becomes the main character. It's almost like the lead instrument. So I would just always think of it as the soloist above the backing track, the instrumentals. And so with Errol, he just rides the music up there. It really drives the movie, which is quite funny when you then work with mixers mixing the music, and they're kind of dialing it back. I'm like, guys, just mix it like you would a CD. CD, how old am I? But just mix it like you would a typical two track. Don't worry about, because in film stuff, you mix it kind of again, leaving space for the dialogue and stuff, really being sensitive to that. Whereas, with this, I'm just like, just make it sound like a great track of music. That's what I've done. And then if they want to take it down with the stems or whatever, fine. But mostly you're going to find that it's riding really high up there in the mix.
And you've got almost 70 minutes of music. I think that's one of the things that I was most impressed with. It kept tracking in my mind that, people say wall-to-wall music, but I think with a documentary, you almost have wall-to-wall vocal and dialogue and narrative, and so that you're kind of riding that wave. And the that you mentioned, I want to just look at two tracks specifically and kind of talk about your mindset, maybe unpack it. You've got Mind Control, which has a very driving, droning, melodic, like a metronome. And then Cielo Drive is, I mean, they couldn't be any more far apart, in my opinion. So, you
Yeah,
do
it drives
need,
the kind of little Celeste at the beginning. You need to bear in mind it was kind of the start of this year, but they're all very different. And I think the reason being this soundtrack in particular, Chaos, it's about Manson, the Manson murders, and I wasn't that aware of them in the UK. So when I moved chatting away to them, and they're kind of like, "Oh yes, it's about this," and I said, "But obviously I'm aware of them." Start learning about it. It's like, fucking hell, but I didn't realize about Manson and the music side of it. And he was a failed artist. Failed artist. He wrote an album. He nearly had a record deal. He screwed Dennis Wilson over from the Beach Boys. Or Dennis Wilson screwed him over and basically took all the rights for, I don't know, whatever, $50. So Manson starts, he doesn't get his record deal. He's been screwed over. And that's basically what set him on the road to insanity. It's like music does this to a person. But so you kind of like, well, if you got him doing his band stuff, I said to Errol and Stephen, I was like, well, let's do a band soundtrack as well as orchestra, because Errol always has orchestra. So it's like, we're going to have orchestra, but let's start it with like band. So literally, it starts off with this. And Stephen was like, I can't play Errol this. That's electric guitar. I was like, just, if it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll go back. It's very different. But just go and play it to him. And the whole feeling for me was like, look, that's the main theme every time you talk about Manson in charge almost. Yeah, he's normal then. And as he starts fading away and his mind goes elsewhere and goes a little bit crazy, then the twisted orchestra and the synth basses and the bomb, 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 bomb. It's almost like the death march up to where these actually take place. And then the orchestra and the twisted orchestra and the little Celeste at the bits to give the innocence. He had these, well, to begin with, three women, and then lots more on Spahn Ranch. And so for me, it was about the innocence of these women basically having their lives destroyed by Manson. So it's trying to combine all of these elements together. It's quite unusual.
well, unusual is an understatement too, because I think one of the things that is most successful about the doc is it doesn't just focus on the man, it focuses on the ripples that he creates and bringing in MK Ultra and the hippie movement. It just showed how many things contributed to make this what it is. But I think there's a really spectacular line towards the end where it says something like everybody thinks of Manson as like supreme being, a master of control, when really it was just mishap after mishap after mishap. And I feel like that's, perception is reality sometimes. When you hear that, you have to put it in context. And let's turn it on you, Paul Leonard-Morgan. Is creating a soundtrack to this or something else just mishap after mishap? And the next thing you know, it's like, this album is awesome.
How did I do that? Oh, or full, and then it's like I won't take the credit for it. But yeah, I mean, you talk about the mishaps before we get to the music. The thing that I found unbelievable was the fact that the first house here, Cielo Drive, was Melcher, the record producer that had turned Manson down. Manson thought that he still lived at that house. It was his old house. So he was going to go and, this is one of the theories, was going to go and, Terry Melcher, he was going to go and kill him. People hadn't done the research. He no longer lived there. And that's when the first murders took place. And he was trying to murder his record producer, which is, I mean, that's one serious mishap to actually, it's Oscar Wilde, once
Yeah.
might be, you know. So from a music point of view, yeah, it's full of happy accidents. I think the happiest accidents are when you run a track. If I've written a cue for later on in the film, and I've suddenly gone, right, I've now found such and such theme. Because this always happens. You work your way through it, you get to the end and go, great, now I found the color of this soundtrack. Now I found the tone of it. Now I'm going to go back and rewrite the entire thing with my new themes. Because, yeah, it takes you a while to get into it. And when you take a cue that's maybe 2.5 minutes long, and then chuck it back at the beginning, and go, right, let's see where it goes. Does it feel tonally right? Sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's great. But the happy accident is when it actually gets a hit point. And so say you're going da 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 bam, and suddenly the bum happens on a bloody murder or whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, obviously this is too literal, but when a little beat happens or that, and it gets it right on the frame, it's like shit. I would never be able to do that if I was actually composing it right from the start. I never, or I never would have thought of doing it there. So those mishaps are completely what it is. Obviously, you've got to have the process. Obviously, you've got to have the ideas. But otherwise, you're not going to have anything to have the mishap with to begin with. But it's the way that you deal with those mishaps and go, oh, interesting. I don't like that, but I totally see what it's doing. And I never would have thought of that. So it's those mishaps that get your brain going in a different direction.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I spoke to Kip Winger last year and he says, despite what anyone tells you, anything that's perceived as genius is more likely an oh shit moment or like absolutely exactly like you're saying. And I think that there's something beautiful about how our minds stretch and reach for things like I haven't told very many people about this, but I was doing an internship in Dallas, couldn't sleep one night. I put on TV and I just put it on mute and I thought, all right, this isn't doing it for me, I'm going to put something else. I played Pink Floyd Momentary Lapse of Reason and Jaws was on. And there were times it was like might have been delirium at 2 in the morning, but it was like, holy shit, Pink Floyd wrote the music to Jaws, and it was just like so, serendipitous. Anyway, so I could see how you do that, but what you said is beautiful. It's a creative. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna put some sauce on it and take it to the next step because one idea leads to another, and then boom, you got it.
I give you another example of that with happy accidents or the way it's more to do with the way that minds work. And everyone's minds are different. No composer will ever write a soundtrack the same as someone else. Doesn't mean that one's better or worse. It's just a different way of doing it. But I was in the car with my daughter the other week and chucking it down with rain, and the windscreen wipers are on. I'm going to sound like such an obsessive by the end of this, but it's like the windscreen wipers are on. She's putting on some track, can't remember what, Olivia Rodrigo or something, and nearly matched, but not quite. And I was like, oh, this is doing my head in. It's like boom, 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 boom. And say, I know the windscreen wipers are going at 120 BPM and the other track's going at 122 BPM. Every now and then it would match up, and then it takes another however many bars for it to match up. But to my utter dismay and joy, but mostly dismay, I looked at my daughter and she was thinking exactly the same thing. And we stopped the windscreen wipers as we were driving. It's kind of middle of the highway. It's like, well, okay. And she's going like 3, 2, 1, boom. And we're both going like this, going, what the fuck is wrong with us? The brains go, the poor thing that my genes have been passed down to her. There's something not right about either of us.
That's amazing. Well, Rihanna has her umbrella, and now Olivia Rodrigo has her windshield wiper. No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, that's a lyric there somewhere, but yeah. I was driving in my car with the windscreen wipers not quite in time with my tune.
Well, you've touched on so many things, whether it's Warhammer or documentaries or narratives or TV movies. Uh, In your mind, do you see music going in a different direction? Do you see things that are more common? Like, what's on the cusp of innovation and originality? What are things you're playing with in your sandbox?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that trying to, it's clearly me getting old, but trying to second guess what is coming up. I mean, it was always the same, like as far as writing pop songs or whatever. It's like trying to second guess what was going to be the culture in 6 months' time. You can't do it. There's no point in trying to, or then trying to imitate what's out now, because by the time you do it, it's dated by the time your stuff comes out. There's absolutely no point, and particularly happens with sounds as well. I think you can look at it as an overriding arch of a style and go, interesting. People don't use tunes that much at the moment. Yeah, it's very much soundscape stuff. Yeah, obviously there are tunes and so on, but it's very much soundscape stuff, which is not. I find that quite hard to write. I'm quite melodic as a composer. It doesn't mean that I can't write weird shit, but I like putting little motifs or melodies or something to hook people in, like Pavlov's dog and the bell. Kind of every time it goes off, the dog hears it. It's like, oh, I feel this. And I think that trying to second guess, you just can't do it. But I think the pace of technology now has gone, it is like that. It used to be like that as a ramp. It's now literally a vertical line. So you become completely exhausted if you're trying to immerse yourself in every single bit of technology and every single style and every single bit of that. We're surrounded by music. It never used to be like that. You were surrounded by music, but it wasn't this wall to wall, put onto Spotify and you fuck over the artist and don't get any money whatsoever. But you will hear any single track that you want. But try and listen to a playlist on Spotify of one of their suggestions, and it just comes back by the time that you're on track 3 to exactly the same play. You could put Beach Boys playlist, Olivia Rodrigo playlist, you could put Chapel Roan playlist, you could put soundtrack playlist. It's still going to come back to exactly the same track by number 3 because it's all owned by the record companies. So you don't get an experience of new music, even though there is so much out there. You don't get that same experience that you used to when you're actually researching and trying to find your own music yourself. And this isn't a moan, but I'm saying that from a point of view of trying to keep up with trends. Trends are what the algorithm gives you. So you either try and be your own person and you try and create your own stuff, or you're just going to go and listen to a load of stuff that the algorithm's giving you, and you're going to end up sounding exactly the same as what's in the algorithm.
Well, no, that is brilliant because I feel like with people who are in cinephiles and people who love watching streaming, that's the same thing. There's this idea, and I'm going to steal this from the article I read it. It was the idea that what you see on Netflix makes you think that that's all that's out there. When there is, Godot, there is Kurosawa, there is, Impressionist cinema, like all these things that if you're just seeing the stuff with the red N on it, or like you just think that that's all you're presented with, but algorithms, like you said. So
Yeah, people's Google searches, I never, because I'm an idiot, I never realized that, when it starts autofilling for you and saying, hey, if I type in what is, and it'll suggest, your favorite mushroom, or what is your favorite? It's complete. Why is my head gone there? I don't even like mushrooms, but it's different for different people. And so when you go on to Netflix, so for example, Chaos, the Manson thing, it's number 3 in films at the moment. So not just documentaries, but films. I mean, 5 million people have watched it. I mean, it's fucking great for us as filmmakers. But does that mean there aren't other films out there that people aren't going to find interesting? No, of course not. But as soon as you turn it on and it's suddenly on the screen, and I don't know what their metrics are to make people watch it or not, but someone else's screen is going to have that's always going to have the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever it goes up to. But then things that you might like, and I forget about shit after a while. It's just like, oh, what was that thing I wanted to watch? Oh, what was that thing I wanted to watch? Your brain just goes to mush when you're trying to find the channel or this or that. So unless it's actually feeding it to me, it's like a little bit of advertising, isn't it? It just reminds you, oh yeah, I went to watch that. It's number 3 at the moment.
you're a slave to the commerce of the cinema and the streaming. So, it's nothing wrong with that because I mean, you just need to get a break every now and then. But speaking of that, Paul Leonard-Morgan, I love saying your name with the hyphen. Paul Leonard-Morgan. How do you relax? How do you unwind? What are your ways to sort of kick up your feet?
The last time I relaxed was 2000. There's a difference between relaxing and trying to get brain space.
Oh, nice.
I don't, jokes aside, I mean, it's been utterly insane the last few years, which is great. I'm loving it and so on. But as far as brain space, I tend to go for a run. I take my youngest daughter to karate. And then while she's there, I go for like a 45, 50-minute run just to try and clear my head. Listen to podcasts, clearly yours, but not music, because that'll be $5. Thank you. I can't listen to music for the simple reason, going back to the windscreen wiper thing, I focus on the fact that all of these tracks are 3 minutes long. So if I'm doing a 60-minute run, then I know that I've got another bloody 19 tracks until the end of my run. And it just depresses the hell out of me. And it's really weird. And you start running to the beat and so on. And I become obsessed with the music. So it's my one chance to actually switch out of the studio, just leave the house and go for 60 minutes of running in the hills or running down the street, whatever else kind of thing. And just actually clear my head. So I like listening to podcasts, and it's your way of kind of listening to culture. But that's my relaxing, running. There you go.
Well, why don't we feather this into what we like to call on the podcast, Paul Leonard-Morgan's 10 favorite things. What are the things that you love in the world? They could literally be anything.
Anything. Smoothies, mint chocolate chip ice cream. Oh my God, why have I, that's 2 foods already, isn't it? Chocolate chip ice cream.
You're so thin, you must not even imbibe it.
I adore traveling. Like, absolutely love it. I love the beach and sea air. I don't know if that counts as 1 or 2 because
4.5.
okay, 4 now. It makes me unbelievably happy just sniffing in all that stuff. But actually, again, as a way of clearing the head. I love dogs. It's not that I'm a cat hater. I also have a cat, but we have 2 dogs and they make me very, very happy. I love family. There you go. That's a very cheesy answer. I love music. I could not live without family or music. Don't ask me to put it in order because that would be very, very tough.
Well, music keeps the lights on and family doesn't, but keep going.
I'll tell them you said that. Music sometimes keeps the lights on, but it's not about that. It's about the passion of the music. I love my Yamaha grand piano. That's my happy place, but again, it ties in with music, so give me a half on that. I love vinyl. I love nature and trees. I planted a whole load of trees outside my studio, and I look at them growing the whole time, and it just makes me happy. I know this is very weird. We have an orchard. Again, that all counts. What am I on? How many's that?
9.
9. And I love film. There you go.
Boom. Paul Leonard-Morgan, everybody. Thank you for your time. Check out Chaos, the Marilyn Manson. Oh, I'm sorry. The
The
charming
Marilyn Manson. You even watch this thing.
well, if you think of Marilyn Manson, the music might be chaos, but you know what? You might like that. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Paul Leonard-Morgan, thank you for your time. Paul, take us out. Quick, what are you working on next? Where people can find you if they haven't found you already?
What am I working on at the moment? I'm working on a new computer game, which I can't tell you about. I'm working on a beautiful little movie called Charlie Harper, which will be out later on the year, I think. I'm working on a beautiful big movie, which I can't tell you what it is. Thank God, no, it's not on the screen behind me. You've got Last Breath that's out at the moment. Just hit the cinemas 2 weeks ago. You've got the Manson thing. There's a film called Inheritance, which is out at the moment. Neil Berger, who I work with on Limitless. Tune Out the Noise. Oh God, I don't know. But Watson, that's on CBS and Paramount Plus. That's a TV series. I don't know. It's all a bit bonkers at the moment.
You know, if I could put up my hand and say one thing, that TV reminds me of Myst or maybe Riven. Maybe you're doing a live action adaptation of one of those video games. But who knows? Who cares? We just know that you are awesome, and we thank you immensely for your time. Everyone, check out Chaos on Netflix and everything else that Paul said. Uh, Clandestine, undisclosed, whatever it is. His music's awesome. Wait for it. It's going to blow your eardrums. Enjoy your day, everyone. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Mark.